Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz, and I am back with 3 fun fold emergency cards using the Spellbinders Quick and Easy card kit of the month. I love this kit. It's got a butterfly theme, lots of fun stuff going on, but you can make these cards without the kit, okay? This is 3¼ by 5½, and then I have another piece that is 1 by 5½, okay? Use the pattern paper that you have. Use ephemera or die cut pieces or stamped images. This is just layouts and techniques. This piece is 2½ by 3¾ and then this is 2¼ by 3½. And here I have used the fluted rectangles dies from Spellbinders. I love the fluted everything, right? You guys know that. So fluted classics rectangles. I've used the smallest one and then the frame that cuts it out separate. So both of those dies. This is a standard size card base, but I've scored it differently. So along the 8½ inch side, I scored at 1 inch and then at 5¼ inches. Okay. So that's how we're going to create the fun fold. It's a standard card dimension, but 1 and 5¼ for our score lines. And it will create this card that has a short flap and a long flap. The pattern paper that we cut is to go on those 2 flaps, and they are going to fit edge to edge on those. Okay, so I'm layering this one on the longer flap, and then I will layer the other piece on the shorter flap. If you've not checked out the Spellbinders Club kits for the month, there's really cool stuff in there. There's this really stunning whale. There's an octopus that dances. There's this jar, this giant, well, like a bottle, right? Like a ship in a bottle kind of situation. They're so pretty and really, really unique. I'll link everything below. Even if you're not going to get them, I haven't seen anything like this, so I would check it out. Here I am layering my 2 rectangles on top of each other, and then I'm trying to decide which flap I want to glue this to. In the end, I glued it to the long flap, but you could go the short flap. That would be fine. And I am making sure I'm not going to glue my card close. So I only put it on like the first 2/3 of that. And then I'm going to add my circle to one side so I can add a little chipboard embellishment. These come in the kit and I like the extra dimension that you get from them. And I will add that right up along the top. Okay. And it says happy heart. So I feel like that can go with just about any occasion that I want. When you get your die cut pieces, you get 2 of each. So these are 2 of the same butterfly and they aren't exactly symmetrical, but they're pretty close, right? So you can't hardly tell. But I'm going to glue this to the short flap. So when you open it up and you're seeing the back side of that butterfly, I wanted you to see the pink butterfly and not just some white cardstock. It also is going to strengthen that. And I thought that was a useful thing to do since I don't know who I'm giving this to and there's lots of little people in my life. Then I'm adding this adorable little inchworm with these gold foil accents. I think he's super, super cute. For a sentiment, I am adding this birthday card is late. This comes from the most recent volume 9 of the emergency card kits. There is a sassy inside to make this into a joke, but it certainly could just be like, this birthday card's late. I'm really sorry. I like the versatility of that. And then I like how these 2 things overlap. You have to like fold them at the same time to close it up. I just think it's super fun. Okay, this one, I adore this. And this was sort of a surprise to me, right? I didn't know, I've never made a card like this. And I didn't think I'd love it as much as I do. So this piece is 4 by 5¼ and then this is the same pattern paper. I have a second piece that's 1 7/8 by 5¼ this next piece is a different pattern paper because I didn't have enough of the green, but actually I like that it changes it up. So 1 7/8 by 5¼ Then I have some pieces. These are going to go along that sort of strip at the top. That's 4 by 1¼ And then in the same pattern paper, I have 2 pieces of the same size and they measure 1 7/8 by 1¼ Okay. To create my card base, I wanted some colored cardstock. So I did pull this one from my stash and I have just created a standard side folding card base. And then I scored the top panel again at 2 1/8. So that top panel will fold in half. It's a Z fold. Okay. So standard card base and then one extra score line on the top flap right in the center. This strip is 8.5 by 1.5, and we're essentially folding it the same way, okay? So I'm gonna fold it in half, right? I'm gonna lay that on top of my card. You can kind of see. This is the same width. I folded it in half, and then I have that score line at 2 1/8, so I can fold it back on itself and create a matching Z fold, okay? The folds are identical, but when we go to put it together, you'll see how we create that fun sort of pop-up mechanism. I'm going to start by adding my pattern paper to the background, and they're all going to go on the same side of the card, the inside, if you will. So I'm going to layer this larger piece onto that open panel that is sort of the back of my card. And then I'm going to stagger my colors. So these are the skinnier strips, and these will line up perfectly on those smaller panels, and it will keep that same kind of margin we had going on from the first one. Okay, here I'm going to add my final piece of pattern paper. You can create something like this with stuff that's in your stash, okay? Again, I just want to remind you over and over that like this kit works really well for something like this because I didn't have to stamp and color and cut out a whole bunch of images, but you can do this with what you have. It's so fun. It's so, so fun. So you can see this sort of accordion fold. It pulls in and out. And I'm laying this piece so you can see it, right? Right now the folds are identical, and I'm slowing this down. I am going to flip that. Okay, I flipped it over on its side. So now the Z fold is going to connect to the back of the card, and that longer strip is going to connect to that short front panel. And when I open it up, it's like it lays flat against the card because they're the same length. That's how we create our pop-up mechanism. So I am going to start by adding glue to just half of that long flap. Okay, just half of it. Otherwise, you're going to glue your card shut. Then I will lay this. I'm going to eyeball it. I'm not measuring it. I'm going to lay it flat against that short panel. I am only gluing this to the short panel. I'm lining up the edges. I can double check along the top. I want that strip to be parallel with the top of the card. Then I will take the short flap on the far right. I'm going to fold it back, add glue, and then lay it flat against my card. Okay. While that glue is still just a little bit wet, I probably should be checking it. I didn't, but you should. Like, make sure it folds flat. Then I'm decorating that strip with some pattern paper just for some added interest, but you could skip this step, right? All of it's optional, but I liked the look of this. And so each of those centers up. It's just like when we added the first pieces of pattern paper, right? Pretty quick and easy, equal margins all the way around. And now you can see I have this sort of box that's created, and it will fold completely flat. I mean, there's some bulk, but it folds flat. It's really, really cool. So I'm going to build a little outdoor scene. I've got this house. There's a couple houses in this kit. I think the pieces they gave you for outdoor scenes on this one are phenomenal. I like the idea of my sentiment being kind of hidden. So that flap is 2 1/8 of an inch. So I've got to butt that circle almost all the way up against the inside. The card kind of opens itself because there is a little bit of bulk, right? It's not like they're going to miss the sentiment, but I like that it's kind of back behind there. My tree is next to my sentiment circle, and it overhangs the edge a little bit, as does that rainbow, but I'm not worried about it. I often hand deliver my cards. You could trim them off if you wanted to. I am adding glue to just like half of this little strip. It's just a pink strip with some butterflies. I love adding little like straight pieces, sort of geometric shapes when there's so many organic shapes on a card. Here, I'm going to add my air balloon to that top strip, but I only want glue on part of it. So it sort of overhangs. If you're worried about whether or not this is durable enough, you could layer it up. You have 2 of each of these, right? So you could like layer the 2 die cut balloons on top of each other. Then I have a chipboard sticker that says happy that I'm putting on there. And then there's a little strip, like a banner strip that says celebrate. that I will add as well. And there's some gold foil detailing on that. And so I'll stick that right up on the top. I thought about adding some more butterfly. I'm trying to hold back here, but let me know. Should I have added butterflies? I don't know. I'm grabbing a sentiment from emergency kit number 9 that says big birthday wishes, and I will add that to our little circle with removable adhesive, and that finishes up our card. I will add my greeting to the back of this one. I didn't want to cover up that pattern paper at all or interrupt my scene for that. So I hope you like that one. For our next card, we are going to create a full panel shaker card, and I just love that the frame creates the sort of see-through element on the front. So I have a piece of cardstock, white cardstock that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That's just for stability. And then this is 3 1/2 by 5 1/2. And then I have some strips of cardstock. Mine are 3/16 of an inch by 5 1/2, but really this is super flexible. I'm just creating an interesting panel for the inside of my shaker. Do that however you want. This is 2 3/4 by 3 1/4. I used some of these frames in the last video using this card kit, and I love that for a shaker, it means that there's an element on the front that I can see through as well. So it's worth looking into, but you could certainly create a frame on your own. I'm adding my pattern paper just to the middle of that white cardstock panel. I pulled the white cardstock from my scrap, but if you wanted to use just the kit, you could use, there's some like scrap cardstock in the packaging. Because I'm going to wrap my acetate around that, I wanted to make sure it was really sturdy and the pattern paper wasn't going to cut it. So I'm adding my strips at 3/16 of an inch. They perfectly meet up to fill that A2 panel, but you could just do, oh gosh, what's like 3/16 times 2? 3/8? I think it's 3/8. You could do 2 strips like that, one on either side, or you could just make the pattern paper a different size. We're just making a background. Do that however it's easiest for you. So then I have flipped that panel over and I've added double-sided tape on all 4 sides. I cut a piece of acetate from some of the packaging that the kit elements came in so that it is just a little bit bigger than my panel. Ideally, you want somewhere between like a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch of acetate overhanging each side. I'm removing the adhesive and I am laying the acetate into it on 3 of the sides. I'm leaving one side open. I'm leaving the adhesive backer on there to make sure I can get my shaker bits into this panel. And then I'm trimming the corners a little, only a little. It's super thin acetate, and if I trim them too much, it will leak. And there's nothing quite like sequins and glittery things leaking. So this shaker fill comes in the kit and it's super pretty. It's this mix that's like iridescent and white and pink. And I like my shakers kind of full, right? Like what's the point if you're not going to put a bunch of fun stuff in there? So I added a bunch. I still have a ton left over, and then I will remove the backing paper and seal this shaker closed on that 4th side. I'm going around and adding double-sided tape on top of that. It's one of the ways that I also make sure that all of that is secured down really well and those corners aren't going to leak. I'm overlapping that place where I kind of trimmed, and there's the possibility of leakage. Okay. And I will remove the backer paper from all of that. You could do this whole thing with wet glue, but I like the double-sided adhesive. It's going to give me some immediate grab, but I don't want it to be too immediate. So I added wet glue on top of the double-sided tape, and then in the middle, it gives me just enough room to wiggle it slightly and line it up. But as soon as I press down, that double-sided tape will grab, and I don't have to worry about things sliding off or shimmying out of place. I'm going to use this frame on the front, and look how fun that is. You can see through the frame and see the shaker bits. I am going to add my circle for my sentiment. I tried it without it and I thought it looked just a little weird with only the sentiment. So I've added glue just a little bit to the edges to kind of add that circle before I lay the whole thing down. And I'm going to secure things with wet glue. I don't do this very often on top of acetate. So I'm being careful to put the glue only kind of in the middle of each of the pieces because I don't want it to ooze out. It looks really kind of weird and cloudy on acetate. Again, I'm going very light with my glue. The Bearly art will dry and will hold, but it takes a little longer. So I'm going to set this aside a little bit. I'm going to let it dry a little bit. And then I will come in once I feel like it's dried a little, and I'm adding another sentiment from kit number 9, and this one says, "You're not old, you're retro." And my mom was like, well, maybe it should say, "You're not old, you're vintage." And I was like, well, my friends are retro and your friends are vintage. So, maybe we need both. And look how much that shakes. It moves beautifully. It's really fun in the background. I love the frame idea here. So here are the 3 cards. We have this one that has this sort of interesting offset gatefold. Here we have, I don't know what these are called. If there's a name for this fun fold, leave it in the comments below, but it opens up to create our scene. And then we have our shaker. I would love to know which of these 3 cards is your favorite. I will leave links to everything below. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you next time.